It is almost out of time. It is strange that it's releasing this year. And you go to like a variety of different locales that are, it is not open world, but it's like a surprisingly large hub area per each area you're in. Not every level is this way, but a lot of them are. And they're intricately detailed, like a Hitman mission is, in terms of like what you can find and look at in each level. It is probably I don't know how they did it, but it has it has super high quality objects that you can just run across in the game world. Like every little thing is really well textured and geometrically detailed, but there's like a great variety of them. Each location is completely different. So I don't know if that's years of work or if they have some sort of crazy scanning setup where they could just scan things into the game really quickly to get them up and running, because the amount of art time that must have been spent there seems ridiculous to me. Like, so like, yeah, like you start on one level and it has completely different objects than another level. Usually there's a lot more continuity in games. That is a little bit of budget and time and all that stuff, but here it really sells it because Indiana Jones going across the entire world. And I think pushing to be a baseline game that drives nearly all of its lighting with a real-time global illumination system, PC and console, Xbox Series S as well too, and the frame rate that they target for that, unlike Senua here, is 60 FPS. And let's be honest, 60 FPS is the premier way to play a game and higher, right? Like, yep. There's nothing better than that crispness of it, and they managed to hit it pretty darn often, John. Right? Like, seriously?
Oh. Like 60 FPS on the console, especially.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's basically perfect.
Yeah.
I actually couldn't. So when it launched, the main issue was that they had these weird stutters and cutscenes, and it's improved, not perfect, but it's improved. But that's it. The actual game, the gameplay, what you see while playing, I feel like I couldn't actually find any real dips. It was basically flawless, which for a game of this scope, it's kind of uncommon, I would say. It was just like, it's really, 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 really smooth. On top of doing like RTGI and like, you have a very high target resolution. And heck, they've continued to refine it because as of recording this, they actually went back in and massively tweaked the RTGI, sort of like filling out the BVH to allow more objects to be captured, which allows the RTGI to look a lot more natural and realistic on Xbox now, more in line with the PC version, I would say. Because it was kind of missing, especially in foliage heavy areas, you're missing a lot of the darkening, like as if the trees just weren't being factored into it really, right? Like, so it was very glowy, which not a huge deal because there's not actually that much foliage stuff. Well, there is a bit more later, but like, a lot of the areas in the game are very heavy on like man-made structures and such, or like open areas, but still the fact that they were able to do that and still had performance headroom is pretty nuts, actually.
Yeah. Another thing that I want to praise, just from the perspective, this is not 100%, but we go back to those other games on that could have been the top 3, like Black Myth, Silent Hill 2, years back, Callisto, where the steadiness of the frame time presentation was not great in those games. Games. Stalker, could have been in maybe the top 10 with, if it didn't have those issues. But Indiana Jones is also like really, really good in that aspect. You walk through the world, bar the saving system, which saves the game maybe a little too often, which doesn't always cause a frame time blip, but it causes sometimes an animation blip. That's the only thing that like makes it slightly less smooth, but it's also just generally very, very smooth. It's not a game where you're just going to be stuttering through it and just like having to deal with that. And I think especially when you get to like Giza, where it's like it feels so wide all of a sudden, the game is like, my goodness. There's a lot to love. Put in the high-end path tracing features, which I'm not even considering there, which like, man, you just watch my video and there's like times where it's like, holy crap, it just like looks incredible.
The full RT stuff is nuts. It's also freaking performant, right?
Yeah,
like I could not believe like I was able to play this not even requiring frame generation with the full RT and still get a pretty darn good smooth experience. Obviously using a high-end graphics card, but from what I've seen, the scalability of it is surprisingly good. And ultimately, I mean, this is crazy what they're doing lighting wise. So yeah, it is going to be expensive. So, but you get RT regardless, I guess, which is the point, right? The
Right.
normal RT is like super performant. It runs like butter, even on lower end systems. But then the full RT mode, also considering what it's doing, is also very, very performant. Certainly more than something like Cyberpunk, I would say, or any other games we've tested where we've had like the sort of full RT stuff going on.
There's a lot to praise about this game. I also think the cutscene direction, in terms of it's not up there with Senua, which is why these are two extremely different games. But I also think they are really great looking in general.
They're overall very good looking. I mean, you're right. It's not up there with the most expensive cutscenes. Like I think like Naughty Dog stuff is still on top. Obviously Hellblade 2 is like insane in that
Callisto
regard.
was also really
Callisto
good.
was all of those were amazing in that regard. This is less so, but still good. And I guess most importantly, it's captivating because the actual performances are really good and the direction and the voice work. So like that part is really good. Yeah, but you're right. Exactly. It's everything else that makes this so special as a whole. And I feel like this argument really is like last year then, like Avatar versus Alan Wake 2 again, because Hellblade 2 is is far more limited than Alan Wake 2 even.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it Alan is Wake still the more limited thing. But brighter. It's also like just, I mean, what can I say about that? We'll get back to it. We're going to kind of have to argue this because Senua, I think we need to talk about what they've done in that.
Or are expensive to be rendering, like foliage at a distance still could be LOD'd in and things like that. But yeah, like I really appreciate, like one of my favorite aspects of UE5 is actually the lack of level of detailed transitions. I like it almost more than Lumen. So yeah, this is hard for me too. Like I think I agree with John's position though in general though, that rendering wise, I would actually put Hellblade at the front. Especially if you look at what it's doing on console. And then, but Indie's overall package of targeting 60 FPS, running as well as it does, scaling to small and very high, and potentially even getting better over time, just because you just run it at a higher resolution, all those things get better with path tracing. I think that for me personally, is just like a holistic sense of like what I think is technically sound. I actually like it more in that aspect to put it on one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with Indie, the thing that I really like about Indie, and I've only played it for like a couple hours here, but the thing that I really like about it is the way that PC version scales really far above the consoles.
Yeah, it does.
Not that the consoles are bad, especially as of the most recent patch, which improves the RTGI presentation in those forested areas. But like it pushes so far beyond just in terms of the way that you get really high quality indirect, diffuse, and specular. It all looks really, really good, and the materials all of a sudden start to take on this new light, and they look really fantastic. Whereas with Hellblade, it's a really good, and it is a fairly scalable experience, but on that high end, you don't really get that extension to the next level, I think, with Hellblade. And to me, that is a really compelling element of Indie as well that we can throw in here. I mean, to me, I think this is a very even contest. I think Indie, just in terms of capturing that Indiana Jones vibe and that spirit, and like I like the comparison that John did in his video, where he actually compared the older films to the newer Indie and seeing how those line up and how they don't line up in certain ways. And I thought that was cool. I think what they're doing with the franchise is cool, and it probably puts a lot more respect on it than maybe the last two Indiana Jones movies that I have to suspect.
Dude, how about also the Indiana Jones things? We talked about great transitions from one scene to the next, time of day. Indiana Jones also does incredible transitions too. You're in 1 second, you're in one area, and then in another second, Indiana Jones wakes up in the college, for example. You transition from Peru to the college almost immediately. You transition from the Vatican via map with no problem to Giza in Egypt.
Like, it's not a video.
It's rendering.
Right. They don't like just cut the video while loading in the background here. It's just like it goes.
It just goes. And I like the first time I saw the transition to Giza on PC, I looked. It's literally rendering stuff. It's cool, man.